Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for the 2018 Foxboro High School Percussion Concert. The first piece was called Ceremonium by Jared Spears. There's kind of different categories of percussion ensemble music. That fits into what I would call the traditional category, which is where keyboard instruments are used melodically and drums and percussion are used how they would be traditionally used in a band or orchestra. It's kind of like a mini percussion band with the keyboard instruments replacing flutes and clarinets and trumpets, etc., and the drums fulfilling their traditional role. And that's an important part of our curriculum to kind of develop a concept of the percussion section as one whole unit with melodic percussion instruments and non-pitched percussion instruments blending together equally to kind of create our own ensemble. The next piece is a very pretty, very nice piece that Fred Harris, who's the director of wind ensembles and jazz bands at MIT, wrote actually for Foxboro a long, long time ago, and I found it and pulled it out and I actually really like it. And this is a different aspect of our curriculum. This is keyboard percussion only music and featuring the marimba, the vibraphone. The marimba, the bars are made out of wood. It's what resonates actually on the instrument, and both the vibraphone and the bells, or although sometimes referred to as the glockenspiel, are both metallophones, meaning they're the part of the instrument that resonates is metal. So there's a song for a lost love by Fred Harris. Most of these students are also studying important works for solo percussion instruments. And that could be any of the instruments you see up here could be treated as a solo instrument playing a piece by themselves. In this case, we're going to hear a solo for 4 timpani, composed by Vic Firth, who was for about 50 years the timpanist in the Boston Symphony Orchestra and also started the drumstick company Vic Firth, which is now the largest drumstick company in the world. And he wrote a whole series of what are called etudes, which are studies for his students to develop the technical skills needed to, most of his students were trying to get into an orchestra themselves someday. So this is etude number 1 with John Michael Boucher. Yeah, nice job, John Michael. Next, we're going to hear a piece called Rudra, which is actually composed by a friend of mine. I'm constantly on the lookout for new, high-quality music that's appropriate for the students we have here. A lot of percussion ensemble music over the years has either tended to be much too easy and simplistic or too complicated for high school students. A lot of it was either geared towards university players or very, very young players, or was just kind of too simplistic, and I always use the word drummy, like not really just interesting repertoire. So I'm always hunting for stuff that's approachable by our students who play at a very high level, but mostly not at the level that a collegiate player would play at. So a friend of mine, Peyton McDonald, has started a project with him and his friends to try to write good music for high school percussionists, and I think he was pretty successful with this one. It's a cool piece. It has the exterior sections are very fast, loud, partially drum-driven stuff, and then the middle really is kind of like a showcase for the metallic sounds available to us. I think it paints a nice frame, kind of, with these exteriors of aggressive drumming and the interior being these cool metallic things. Next piece is another keyboard ensemble piece by the Baroque composer Domenico Scarlatti. He's primarily known for his harpsichord music, and the nice thing about his music is actually transfers quite nicely to these keyboard percussion instruments because they have a very percussive, clear attack in the same way that a harpsichord would. A couple general notes about what we're doing here tonight. Probably you noticed on the program that it says director, not conductor. Because if you haven't noticed, I actually haven't had a baton all night. And I rarely do during this concert, which I think is a special and a rare thing. The whole definition of chamber music originally was music that was intended to be played in the chamber, in the home, in a room, set aside for it actually. And obviously, you and your kids are not going to hire a conductor to come to your living room. So traditionally, this music has always been unconducted, which is a very special, very risky at times, but very rewarding experience to have to be accountable for what you're doing and communicate clearly with the rest of the group during a piece. It could involve a lot of things, just maybe somebody gets slightly lost. How is the group going to get that person unlost? How are you going to stay together, especially if the piece is changing speeds? And the nice thing about percussion instruments is actually we're all holding two batons. And so hopefully through deep knowledge of the music, listening to each other really well, and watching each other, percussion ensembles in theory should mostly be able to play without the aid of a conductor, which is a nice thing for us to be able to do. We also spend a lot of time working on how we breathe, because that little intake of air is actually a very nice cue on when to play or something changing. And you might not think of percussion as breathing, but that little sniff before we play a note is actually very helpful for making things stay together. But like I said, it can be risky not using a conductor. Things can go wrong, but like all things in life, unless you take risks, you never really get a great payback for it. So fortunately, the payback for that risk is making some rewarding music. And one thing that's also nice to do on this evening is give our seniors a chance to do a little something different than they might normally do. So John Michael was one of our seniors, played a very nice Vic Firth solo. And then we're going to have Lizzie Peterson come out and do some timpani duets, and I will play with her. So it's nice to give them a little bit of recognition for what they've done in their time here. So it's going to be a timpani duet. Look out. many of our students are also studying the drum set. And the drum set can be a viable solo percussion instrument in its own right. So here's going to be Corey Hall playing a piece called Three Cubed. We're now going to hear a piece featuring one of our other seniors. It's a very cool piece called Clapping Music. And I always think of a piece like this. I think of music that, as historically in its development, is quite cyclical, like a lot of other things in history. And one era tends to be a reaction, either pro or con, to the era that preceded it. And This piece is from, what's the copyright, 1970 something? 1972, okay. So this piece was written in 1972, and kind of what was going on in that time period was the music of the early 1900s was gaining complexity and was becoming, for most people, much less enjoyable to listen to than music had been previously. So there was a group of composers, mostly in the New York and San Francisco area, in the late 60s, early 70s, who kind of sort of said, like, okay guys, enough is enough. This music is so complex and unlistenable, like we got to make a change. And they did not create this label, it was sort of put on them, and the label was minimalism. And the initial concept of minimalism was to sort of strip music down, make it simple and listenable again, and in some ways to try to make what's happening in the music transparent to the listener. And so a lot of pieces that sort of have very simplistic components started to be composed in a hope that they could sort of bring audiences back to wanting to listen to classical music again. Classical, that's not a great term. Symphonic music would be a better term. Sorry, my terminology was not very on point. I need a footnote or something. So it's something else, but it's gone. So you'll hear a pattern that we play, and then the pattern sort of moves and then eventually comes back together again at the end. And hopefully it's not something that's entirely obvious what's going on, but I think you'll be able to hear that there's an idea that's presented that gets worked through in many different ways and then returns at the end. I know what I was going to say. The other thing that these composers were also strongly influenced by was rock music. A combination of rock music, and then Steve Reich especially spent some time living in Ghana. Funny Steve Reich story. He went to Ghana for a while, and it's not an exact quote, but he said like any other like dumb American, I went to Ghana where nobody wears sandals, and I wore sandals because I guess nobody wears sandals, and he got bit on his toe by a tsetse fly and actually got malaria and had to come back to the United States. So there's a Steve Reich story for you. Would have studied longer in Ghana if it weren't for malaria. last piece utilizes all of our forces. It's many ways similar to the first piece we played. However, it's not as traditional in its use of the instruments. It's basically in almost the exact same instrumentation. Timpani, drums, cymbals, keyboard percussion, but it uses the instruments in a much different way. It uses the non-pitched percussion instruments in a lot more melodic fashion than the first, and the music is a lot more kind of complex and varied. And the piece is called a rondo, scherzando. The rondo form is a very old structure of music, and it's basically, you get material, contrasting material. The first material comes back, you get new contrasting material. If you were to label it, it would be A, B, A, C, A, D, and rondos can continue from there. And also it's going to feature a little bit of improvising in the middle. Everything okay, Corey? Okay, good. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoy final piece of the night, Rondo Scherzando by James Dotson.